So several weeks ago, that's already better. Yeah, thank you. Is that a bit better? Okay, good. Don't have to grit our teeth and bear it. We can work it out in real time, I say. So several weeks ago, Charlene, our music director, shared with me that she overheard Carol Burney's piano lesson with Guy at their house. And the music that Carol was playing was, in Charlene's words, beautiful. And typical to our dear Charlene, who's one of the most impressive movers and shakers I've ever had the joy of knowing, she makes things happen. She immediately asked Carol if she would like to play some of these pieces of music at worship this month. And the moment she said to me, Carol Burney and jazz, I was all in. Those are the only 3 words that I needed to hear. Jazz is sacred music to me. It's music of the heart and soul. It is wild and prophetic. It's difficult. It's healing. Yeah, jazz is sacred music. Last week, I told the story of Saint Teresa of Avila to our young ones, and that vision that she had of this angel who came to her at her moment of greatest suffering, and she pointed her bow and arrow right at Teresa's heart, letting it fly and piercing it, not to kill her, but to open her, set her afire, set her heart afire in some way. Jazz is like that arrow. It is love in all its multitudes. I said those words last week too. Embodied in sound and voice and rhythm, piercing right into the heart of the matter. But here is where I tell you that for most of my life, I hated most of this music. I mean, I like those easy songs, the nice background musical pieces that felt relaxing, but like jazz with its minor notes and shifting, sometimes frenetic pace made me a little uneasy. Maybe I'm not alone. What is this? Am I supposed to feel relaxed? I don't. And I felt this way until 2018. Yeah. Because in 2018, I had the greatest honor and privilege of studying with Dr. Cornel West in seminary. So for those of you who don't know that name, Cornel West is an African-American philosopher, political activist, social critic, public intellectual, scholar. I could keep going and going. He is a living prophet for our time, truly. And in 2018, he was teaching at Harvard, and he offered a class called The Historical Philosophy of W.E.B. Du Bois. And because seminaries in the Boston area are a part of what we call the Interreligious Consortium, I was able to register for it as a student from Boston University. Lucky me. And every week for 3 months, alongside 60 or so other students, I got 3, sometimes 4 hours, for sometimes class ran way over, uninterrupted, 3 to 4 hours with this man who at age 65, in his standard issue black 3-piece suit, some of you know the one, with cufflinks and a pocket watch, leapt and flew around that classroom with not one note in hand ever, chalk flying, arms waving, fists pounding, at times breaking out into song, moving around the classroom's aisles, sweating and shouting and holding our hands and touching our shoulders and like getting on his knees at times, praying to God. He never stopped for a bathroom break, a sip of water. 3 to 4 hours of this every week. And he knew all of our names by heart at the end of that 3 months. So we were studying the works of the great African-American sociologist and activist W.E.B. Du Bois, who is most known for his 1903 collection, The Souls of Black Folk. Maybe some of you have read it. It reads as though it was written last week. And we dove deep into Du Bois's work, for West is a Du Bois enthusiast. But the class was so much more than an academic pursuit. Cornel West hates academic pursuits. He's very open about this. He's all about awakening the heart and soul, as he says. Burning, pierced through with arrows, awakened love. Raw human experience, he calls it. In the face of catastrophe, love. This is what he calls wisdom, not degrees from Harvard. And it was this kind of heart-opening wisdom, raw love that embodied the souls of Black people in their struggle for liberation. This is what he taught us. This is what he taught us. So this class was nothing short of a revelation. And it was West who opened my heart to jazz during that class. So on the second to last week of class, we arrived in this kind of processed morning because we had been asked to read a chapter out of Du Bois's The Souls of Black Folks for class, and the chapter was called Of the Sorrow Songs. One chapter. Dr. West asked us to read it 10 times so that it got in our bones and didn't just stay up in our heads, as he would say. Now, sorrow songs are, of course, the songs of the slave. We sang one for our meditation hymn this morning. There is more love somewhere. I'm going to keep on till I find it. And we were certain that our 3, maybe 4 hours that day would be somber ones. How could we not? So Dr. West and his teaching fellow Will, Brother Will, arrived and spoke quietly to one another up front and fiddled around with wires and cables as Will pulled out his laptop. You could have heard a pin drop. This wasn't how class normally had begun in the past. And then Dr. West pulled a chair up front and took a seat facing us. And suddenly the first few notes of John Coltrane's A Love Supreme started playing over the classroom speakers, and like loud, like cranked to the highest loud, like people walking by outside peering through the glass, walls shaking loud. And Dr. West started shouting over the music, "Coltrane! Coltrane!" And I tried my best that day to write down what Cornel West continued to shout out about A Love Supreme. Here's what I wrote. I pulled out my notes this past week. These are West's words. Coltrane, an example for each and every one of us about how we engage in self-questioning, how we engage in prophetic witness, how we engage in having a belief in ourselves, a confidence in ourselves to reach the highest heights. Coltrane takes us to the dark roots of our scream and also to the celestial heights of sublime silence. Coltrane, he said, love supreme, all has to do with suffering, pain, hurt, and how we transfigure our suffering and pain and hurt into an expression that touches other people's suffering and pain and hurt. And what is required, he asked? Attention, consciousness, and the maturation of a compassionate soul. A love supreme, he shouted over and over. I'm glad I wrote those words down so that I could read them again and again. They've been on my mind and heart for weeks now. I can't think about love, the path of love is our worship theme this month, without hearing Dr. Cornell West cry these words out in that classroom, words about love of self, of other, of transfiguration, what is required, attention, consciousness, and a maturing of a compassionate soul. Now, I need to share just a bit about Coltrane, John Coltrane, who is one of the greatest jazz saxophonists to ever live. He was also a band leader and composer. His music really hit its pinnacle in the 50s and 60s. And what makes Coltrane's Love Supreme, written just 2 years before he died in 1966, so magnificent and so difficult. It is not an easy listen. Some of you might have clicked on that link in the Arbella on Friday and given it a whirl. It is not an easy listen. It is because it captures love in all those multitudes. Yeah. Not an easy listen, for there's nothing easy about love in all of its multitudes. A love supreme is imbued with love lost, love longed for, love of self, love of humanity, love of God, unrequited love, black love in the face of oppression and trauma. And its composition moves through 4 parts, which he titled Acknowledgement, Resolution, Pursuance, and Psalm. A Love Supreme is Coltrane's great awakening, embodied in music. And it was written out of his life-threatening struggle with addiction, drug addiction and alcoholism, and his recovery. A raw, honest devotional told through music, whose every note pleads love. Love. I agree with West that it takes us to the dark roots of our scream and also to the celestial heights of sublime silence. Sacred music, indeed. And this white girl didn't know that this is what jazz is all about. Shocker. And that this is what black music is all about. I didn't know this until Dr. West did what he did in that second to last class about sorrow songs. For we didn't stop at Coltrane's Love Supreme. We time traveled through all black music, gospel and blues, jazz, funk, soul, hip-hop, Bessie Smith, Thelonious Monk, Sarah Vaughan, James Brown, Erykah Badu, Janet Jackson, Charlie Parker, Duke Ellington, Tupac Shakur, Beyonce. And Dr. West called this his sorrow songs playlist. For they were all sorrow songs. Liberative music born out of oppression, preaching the gospel of love in all its multitudes. And at times we sat quietly with our eyes closed as if we were at a contemplative Vespers service, and then he would fade it out and like Stevie Wonder's Superstitious would blare, and suddenly we were in a dance club and clapping and dancing and sweating, and then back to our seats for Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit. And then Prince's Kiss, up and down, swelling for 4 hours. 4 hours of that. Yeah. I have the videos to prove that this was not a dream, for it felt like one. The point of that culminating class was to help us get into our bones and bodies what love and liberation, interchangeable words in West's mind, felt like. He had no interest in talking about sorrow songs. He wanted us to experience them. And that wasn't going to happen from the neck up. Love doesn't happen from the neck up. You know that. And I am mainly now speaking to my dear white siblings. We have so much to learn about this kind of love and radical human rawness and depth of soul. These are difficult days. Most of us carry so much trauma, ancestral and otherwise, in our overburdened, blocked, and stifled systems, that a whole, raw human experience, embodied or expressed, terrifies us. Terrifying. Most of us are, by no fault of our own, disconnected from our bodies, from the earth, from each other, from ourselves. And you know this is not a healthy way to live. Cornel West asked us again and again, and he meant this question to be for everyone: what happens? What happens when you live in a civilization that deadens you? The answer: you become unintentionally closed to love. Yeah, brittle in spirit. And horrible things happen at the hands of those who are closed to love and brittle in spirit. We know this. And isn't this why you're here at church? At this church? Right? To cultivate some depth of soul? To heal? To open to love? To have your heart pierced open by divine arrows? What else are you here for? And I want to tread carefully here, because I'm not asking you, a predominantly white congregation, to equate your struggles with the struggles of Black people. Nor am I prescribing the wisdom, music, and word born out of Black oppression to be yours now for the taking. In the same way that we sing and play sorrow songs here, take care. Take care. Honor the context with which they were written and sung, who they were for and who they weren't. But we are also called to learn and be opened by these prophetic voices, and we need their messages of vulnerability like we need air and water. We need their messages of embodied healing and hope, the wholeness and radical rawness of human experience and expression about love, and how to have faith in it in the face of horror and despair and catastrophe, how to keep on until we find it. We are also, yes, called to learn and be opened by these prophetic voices. And I have gotten the great joy of listening to John Coltrane's A Love Supreme about 15 times this past week. I hope you will do the same. If you've already listened to it, listen to it again, not just from the neck up. Take the 33 minutes. You've got the 33 minutes. And be open to the possibility of your heart being broken open by it. Attention, consciousness, the maturation of a compassionate soul. This is what love requires, said Dr. West, a love supreme. And I say amen and thank you to Dr. West and to John Coltrane for sharing their love with us. And I want to circle back in closing to the words from our reading today. Hopefully this will feel good to you before we sing, and I hope dance just a little. Can dance. Fault Line by Robert Walsh. Just a few of the words. When the great plates slip and the earth shivers and the flaw is seen to lie in what you trusted most, look not to more solidity, to weighty slabs of concrete poured or strength of cantilevered beam to save the fractured order. Trust more the tensile strands of love that bend and stretch to hold you in the web of life that's often torn but always healing. There's your strength. The shifting plates, the rest of earth, your room, your precious life, they all proceed from love. They all proceed from love, the ground on which we walk together. May it be so.